we're ready to go. So yeah, welcome. Pretty much, yeah. Just ongoing commercial. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, wait, it's all cardboard and duct tape. That's it. Son of a bitch. Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Hmm. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, yeah. Yeah, it is. Right. Right. Yep. Yeah, and that's a big part of it is I've been spoiled doing it the real way for 20 years and kind of taking for granted the give and take of the audience being there in the room because when I'm in this room and I'm staring at just my bookshelf is right there. I've got some plants over there. I've got my pull-up bar there, and I have to bring all the energy, and none of it's coming back. So it's so wacky. Yeah, yeah, almost. Right, exactly. Some witty repartee. I can at least show off how clever and in the moment I can be, but yeah, online it's not there. What's even funnier to me is the show that Red Horse saw was absolutely atrocious. Almost everybody just didn't show up, and there was maybe two people on Zoom, and then the people who were in the chat room we're experiencing a glitchy feed. So then Ashley's freaking out because they're freaking out on her about, I want a refund. What are you going to do to make this right? So I'm sitting here looking at her while she's trying to do crowd control and she's getting freaked out and I'm getting distracted. And it was just such a shit show. And that's one of the old adages is, oh, you want to make sure a show goes real bad? Invite some friends. And I was like, son of a bitch, they did it again. Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones that I've done in the past 4 months. Right, since I started doing on the online. Yeah, that was the one that it was actually like, okay, this is fun. This isn't work. Right, right. Uh huh. Oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that really is a cool angle to it to me is that like as far as I can tell that seems very plausible. May not be true, but very plausible because tarot cards they just come out of nowhere in terms of history and that word it doesn't come from anywhere and like their focus there we go. So I mean like the imagery is very Christian centric, right? Like angels and pouring out grace and that kind of thing. So it's straight up that thing. So it just follows the number from no number all the way through, and it's just kind of the process of the magic of being alive and doing whatever you want to, oh, now I have to choose love or knowledge. And okay, I'm going to choose knowledge, which means I got to go be a hermit to learn my craft and now devote my skills to the betterment of humanity. And then that sets me free. Just like, that's a pretty good message right there. Yeah. Hmm. See, thank you. So I often wonder, I'm like, is that like just storytelling time, dead air? They're like, come on, monkey boy, do some tricks, do some tricks, stop talking. So that's good to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point because yeah, they can't. Not too many people are going to be researching that kind of thing on their own. So then I could be like, "Here's something interesting." They're like, "Oh Lord, that is interesting. Let me hear more about that." Awesome. All right, I like it. Thank you. That helps me keep that in there. Awesome. Well, looks like we're about at the top of the hour, so I'm going to switch over to here. So, yeah. First of all, thanks for agreeing to be on the show proper. I've wanted to have you on for a while.
Yeah,
So when you DM'd
good.
me, I was like, yes,
Yeah,
let's do this.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
for just housekeeping, I want you to introduce yourself. That way, I don't have to do it, and two, it's perfect because you did
Yeah.
it. So
Okay.
for the slate, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chuck Whitworth. I'm also known as Chief Chuck online. That's where I started. You can find that handle is at Twitter. Um, I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. Did 24 years in the Navy. Did a couple of years in the Army prior to that. Decided that I was tired of camping out for a living, so the Navy kind of offered me up something I wanted, which was aviation. Was a P3 Orion flight engineer. You can Google a P3 Orion, find out what kind of airplane it is. Got a little over 5,000 something flight hours. Been around the world a few times, including the North Pole. And, we got done with that in 2007, went to work for the government as a civilian with Naval Air Systems Command. And now I'm a program manager in foreign military sales. I work in weapons and energetics. The closest thing that I can relate to anybody that would understand what I do is I work on the programs with the Harpoon missiles and also the ejection seat energetics, the things that fire the ejection seats out of the aircraft. I always tell everyone if you go and watch the ejection scene from Behind Enemy Lines, that movie, it goes into pretty good detail on an F-18 Hornet, the ejection sequence, and what it takes everything to fire to get someone out of an airplane. It all happens in seconds, but there's about 233 things that have to fire in perfect sequence, milliseconds apart, um, to get that guy out of the airplane safely. So, but that's what I do now as a program manager. I live in Southern Maryland in the DC area because that's where we're based,
Hmm.
and like I said, I'm online a lot on Twitter. I've taken a stab at being an author. A couple of other groups, some leadership stuff we'll talk about, I'm sure. But that's pretty much me. That's me wrapped up in about a 2 minute elevator speech.
I love that. And yeah, I've wanted to have you on here for a long time to talk about leadership because to me, people who have been in very high stress environments, and I could only imagine flying, military flying is one of the highest stress environments. And now with your current work, working with the military in a consulting and kind of business dynamic, especially working with energetics of ejecting a human being out of a rocket, basically is what it is. And
Yeah,
those 233 things need to go perfect within milliseconds. That's the kind of project management chops I want from anybody telling me about leadership and group dynamics and organization. Because
right.
what really gets under my skin are people who read 3 books on business leadership and then say they're a business leadership guru,
Yeah,
and that just eats me up alive. So yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into that.
good.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in terms of what it was about flying that got you interested, is it just that childhood dream of that's magic? How in the world does that work? And that fascination never left you, or was it just kind of like oh, this would be a good change of pace from whatever it is that you were doing?
Yeah, no, exactly. I would say probably just like 90% of the people that wind up in an aviation field, it goes back to your youth. For me, it was when I was little, I grew up in North Georgia, close to the South Carolina line. And, we would take my grandmother and my aunts to Atlanta to the airport. At the time, You know, at the time it was one of the biggest, not the biggest or busiest yet, but still a large airport. And so we would go to the terminal, and I have a recollection of sitting there at the window watching these planes take off and just being fascinated by it. And as I grew older, got into high school, stuff like that, aviation still was just, it was something magical to me. People get on an airplane, this big, huge metal thing goes and flies, and it lands safely. So that got me involved. And so I knew growing up, coming out of high school, I wasn't a college guy. I wasn't going to be a college guy. I was a class clown, didn't have grades, didn't want to be honest with you. I saw my other friends go to college and waste their parents' money partying. And I said, no, I'm going to go join the military. Part of it's to get out of a little small town and see the world. But part of it, I knew this was my gateway. So when I got into aviation, I was a maintainer at first, working maintenance, and went on a flight for a deployment. We flew all the time, but I flew on a P3 with our squadron. We flew to Rota, Spain. And one of the flight engineers, who was my chief at the time, he's like, hey, man, sit up front. Sit up front with us, man. You can sit up front the whole drive. Cool. So, I sit there for takeoff, engine starts, takeoff, watched him do his thing. And I said, this is what I want to do. This is so cool. So, yeah, it's a bug that bites you early. And then when you learn the science behind flight, in some aspects, it's a letdown, because you find out that there's a simple explanation for it, in your mind, because you learn it, but still the magic in it still comes, that all of the things it takes to put all this together and make it happen, and all of the support behind it, and just it's hard to explain to people that haven't flown up front in a flight station. We can't say cockpit anymore because, well, for reasons.
Right.
So the flight station, uh, those days that we called it cloud surfing.
Mm.
You're flying, just skimming the tops of the clouds when they're, the fluffy cotton clouds, and bright blue above you. And you're just surfing them, and it's truly like the poem says online. You have reached out and touched the face of God. That's what it feels like. So that's flying.
That's amazing, because it really is like that, where you've got to know metallurgy, you've got to know
Mhm.
physics, and the Bernoulli principle, and all these interlocking disciplines that have taken us tens of thousands of years of human knowledge and experience to get to the point where two brothers who worked on bicycles go to some dune in North Carolina and suddenly transform the world. And in fewer than 100 years, we're flying at Mach whatever. We're sending
Yeah,
people to the moon. Like,
yeah,
that's phenomenal. And to be right behind that windshield has got to be exhilarating.
it is. You think about what's going on, and you think about every one of those processes that's having to happen simultaneously. Lift, thrust, weight, drag, all of the stuff that you learn in school and science, but you also, you know, you have a very real appreciation, for the fact that when you get to fly, and whether you're just a passenger on Southwest, or you're a naval air crewman, you're a pilot, whatever, you are truly standing on the shoulders of some giants. In our day and age, I mean, the story of the Wright brothers is just phenomenal. And the thing is that this is it's what all ties us in. And I wrote an article, and you can find it, not for a shameless plug, on my website yet, but you can find an article, and I wrote about it. And it's, the history of it is, the little twirly sticks with the feathers on it that
Hmm.
would be like gyrocopters. Orville and Wilbur's dad brought one of those home one time, and they sit on the porch playing with it for hours and hours and hours. And it just, one day it clicked to them that, well, how does this work? And it started it. So I kind of use that a lot in some of the times when I do leadership talks or motivational talks. I use that the simplest, smallest, very little, tiniest, just unbelievable thing can lead to a massive idea that changes the world. These kids playing on a porch with a little spinny gyrocopter, it sparked something, and look where we are now. Elon's Tesla is flying past Mars. you know.
Yeah.
So, and we're doing hypersonic weapons, we're doing hypersonic flight, and like you said, in the time span of about 100 years, a little more, we've done this. So, never discount the smallest idea or thought. That's the point of that.
I love that. And I've got a stupid question for you.
Sure.
Oftentimes the job descriptions are so brutally literal, but I lack the experience of going through it, that what in the world is a flight engineer?
Flight engineer on a P3, it's an enlisted aircrew position that for the military. You're not a commissioned officer. Everywhere in the military, if you're a pilot, you're an officer. You're a commissioned officer. The flight engineer is up front. On a P3, we sit up between the pilots into the flight station. Essentially, what I was responsible for is I am responsible for the entire mechanical and systems operation of the aircraft. I also was responsible for flight planning, time for fuel on station, how much fuel we need, you know, do basically doing emergency procedures. Because the way the P3 was arranged, it's a maritime aircraft for submarine hunting. So we typically, when we would hunt for submarines or we would rig for drug runners or any of the other low maritime patrol stuff we're doing, we're typically less than 1,000 feet off the water and typically traveling at about 230 miles an hour. So the concept was set up by the Navy. Is the way it worked is you have the pilot and the co-pilot sitting up front. I sit slightly behind them and up because I've got the whole instrument panels, I've got the throttles, fuel panels, circuit breakers, I've got everything around me. The process behind that was is you've got the pilot over here who is he's flying and literally he's flying the aircraft. It's an old cable. It's not a fly by wire. It's just a cable and push pull tubes. He's flying the airplane and watching the water. The co-pilot is watching him watch the water, but the co-pilot's also communicating. He's talking to the tactical officer in the back. He's talking to the crews. We're throwing out sonobuoys, weapons, whatever we're doing. The flight engineer's job is to stay inside the flight station, watch the instruments, watch altitude, back everybody up. But my thing is he aviates, he communicates. I mind the airplane, and it's kind of a crew teamwork thing, so that no one person has. I don't look out when we were down low. I mean, I would look outside, but my job was to stay inside,
Hmm.
um, monitoring everything, so I could tell them, "Hey, try to anticipate something." But a lot of times it would come down to the point of because they become so task locked. You're down low, you see a sub, you see a boat, you're trying to get it, you're banked over at like 70 degrees, sky up here, water down here, you're 200 something miles an hour. If the worst case scenario, you're literally about, most times it was about 1.5 to 3 seconds to impact. So they become so focused that you have alarms that go off in your head for low altitude. We call it low RAWs. And if you got below 250 feet, it would constantly just rattle your head. But these guys become so focused, you don't hear it.
Mm.
They couldn't hear it. There have been times that I have literally taken the power levers and pushed power on this propeller airplane to make us climb without any input from him. And I'm slapping him on the shoulder, going, "Low RAWs, sir, low RAWs." And they're like, "Shit," pull up and we go. But you know, that's the thing. I did my job, he does his. I don't try to fly the airplane. He doesn't try to do my job. So it's very rewarding. A lot of studying, a lot of learning you have to do, but you're also the crew supervisor for the crew in the back of the airplane. You fuel the airplane. We would routinely shut down one engine to save fuel.
Mm.
We've even shut down two engines to save fuel. You're down on the water, you're low. We don't we had restrictions, but you have to know procedures so fast that I have 20 seconds to restart an engine. So there's no time to go through a checklist of, "Hey, pilot, may I do this now?" No, it's just you're shitting and getting it, man. You're pulling levers, pulling the buttons, hitting the switch, and you go. So it's a lot of inherent trust, and that's what I really liked about it the most was um, level playing field between officers and enlisted in the flight station. He sat about a foot and a half to 2 feet ahead of me. So the running joke is the only difference between us is he's going to get to the scene of the crash about a millisecond before I do. So there's no benefit to being a commander or a captain. I've flown with admirals before, and the flight station vibe stays the same. It's not Admiral so and so. It's just we're there because we're all counting on each other to get everybody home. So
That's amazing. And one thing that had been on my radar for a while is that you always have to trust your instruments more than your kinesthetic awareness.
Mhm.
Your silly human sensors are easily tricked and deceived, and
Mhm.
your body could tell you you're doing one thing, but the instruments are saying something completely different, and you should always obey the instruments.
Yep.
So is that a thing that basically only happens if you're flying the plane, or is that something that you experienced even if you weren't directly in control? Because for me,
Oh yeah.
I think of it like I'm driving a car. I'm the one with the hands on the steering wheel. I feel the road. I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm wearing the car like a skin, and
Mhm.
the passenger is just experiencing what I'm doing, but doesn't have that same dialed in nature. So is that something that you ever went through, like
Mhm.
firsthand?
Mhm. Yeah. Even sitting in the seat, not having any kind of tactile feel of the airplane. Obviously, I can feel the airplane under me. I'm sitting in it. I'm strapped to the seat. But there have been plenty of times you're flying in IFR conditions, which is totally instrument flight rules. You're in clouds, you can't see anything. Or the worst, even worse than that, is because it's odd. People don't realize that when you're flying in clouds in the daytime, you could be totally socked in, but you're always going to have moisture and condensation on the windshields, and they run up the windshield in the airstream. So as long as you look, it's almost like when you're underwater. If you watch your bubbles, bubbles are up. No matter they teach us that in aircrew school when we go through the dunker you've seen on the movies. They throw you in the dunker, turn you upside down. You got to swim. Look for the bubbles. The bubbles go up. They always will. So you can watch condensation on the windscreen and keep your frame of reference that okay, that's still up and that's still back. I'm still going this way. I'm not turned upside down. Night is the worst because you're out in the ocean at night and you've never seen, I would say probably 80% to 90% of the population has never seen a true black night. When you're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, somewhere between the coast of South America and the Galapagos Islands, it is pitch black. I mean, black. You can't tell water, horizon, there's nothing. Um, that starts freaking you out because you can sit there and if you turn a certain way, if you turn a certain amount of time, it's just physics. It's the medical physiology. They tell you inner ears, you're turning like this, and you can look at the instrument, and the instrument says you're flying straight and level now, but you're still sitting there like this because you still feel like you're turning, and it's very disorienting. And you're right, you have to absolutely. That's why we have so many redundancies built into the systems. There's two gyros, there's two compass headings, there's three backups in the back, there's six GPS receivers sitting back there in the back. There is just redundancy on redundancy on redundancy. So that if one breaks, you're not screwed and you're not stuck. But mostly it's just to keep us to going. Nope. Little ball says I'm straight and level. Little ball says I'm on a heading of 270. GPS says I'm on a 270. GPS says this says. So you have to. It teaches you to fight that panic of I'm upside down. No, you're not. You're not upside down. You think you are, but you're not. So yeah, it is a very real thing. And we learn it in aircrew school. And funny enough, it ties into what you do. What are your eyes seeing? And more importantly, what is your mind telling you that your eyes just saw? Because it's not always true. It's not. I've been flying and I could have sworn that, like I said, could have sworn we were in a turn. And I'm sitting there watching the instruments. I'm going, no, but part of you goes, well, I feel this. My brain's telling me. And I tell people that we learned in physiology that your brain is not as smart as you think it is sometimes, not when it comes to what's connected to your body.
Yeah. Your
You
brain
know,
is what tells you it's smart. Of course it's going to say it's the
yeah,
smartest one.
yeah, it does. So yeah, that is absolutely a thing, man. It's freaky
Mm,
sometimes, but you just can't. The thing is, you can't panic.
yeah, and that's a really good literal example of your gut can often lead you astray.
Hmm.
People always say go with your gut. Most of the time, your gut is actually going to get you killed. Like if
Yeah,
you go through your gut reaction, sometimes that can be super super bad. And my life started getting better when I started ignoring my gut reaction, my knee jerk reaction, my tendency to do this. I was like, maybe I'm going to do the thing that feels wrong. And then suddenly my life got so much better. It was like, oh, doing the wrong thing is what felt right because that's what I had the most practice doing, and my gut was out of alignment with what I should be doing. So doing the right thing feels weird because it could be telling you exactly the wrong thing to be doing.
yeah. I tell people, trust in your gut sometimes when you're making a decision that has no life bearing on it. Whether, hey, should I hire that person? Should I go to Aunt Sally's Christmas party? Those are all gut instinct reactions that you can recover from pretty quick. As we learned through repetition in the simulators, repetition on training flights, trust the process. The checklist, everything has been done. Don't try to outthink the smart people. Trust the process. Everything is becomes just it's we make fun of ourselves. We had an old saying for a flight engineer. It's like, hey, you pull the engine handle, shut it down, the banana falls out of the ceiling, you get your reward. That's just how simple it can be, but that's just how simple it is. But you train to that to where I was an instructor flight engineer as well, and I taught new guys how to do what we do. And I would sit there and tell them that, and you would watch it, they would instinctively, because they do all of this book learning first. You put them in the simulator box, you give them a malfunction, you give them an engine fire. Light glows red around a handle in front of you, big warning horn goes off in your head. The procedures is you pull the emergency handle, fire bottle discharge hit, emergency shutdown checklist, and then you go to there. You would see guys that go, the fire warning light horn would come on, the light would go on, you'd see them sit there and hesitate and go, well, I wonder why the engine's on fire. Does it matter at this point? Can you fix it at this point? Put the fire out, dummy. Pull the handle, get a banana, and we'll talk about it later. You can't pull an airplane over at 15,000. You can't pull over on the side of the road and think it over. You got to just do it. So yeah, gut instincts. If I were to have executed being a flight engineer just on gut instincts, I would have been dead after about the first 20 hours. Um, Process, procedure, repetition, and trust in those things are what got me to where you are. You can't operate on gut instinct.
So let's talk about going from that environment where you've been trained to trust the process because there's been a million hours spent creating this process. Just like for me, I've spent a million hours learning to perform this sleight in zero point 0.2 seconds. So I've got a million hours to zero point 0.2 seconds of skill to where I don't need to think about it anymore. You've got a whole team of other people that are just as well trained as you are to trust the process. Now you transition out of the military and you're still working with the military, but I
Mhm.
could only imagine that in the private sector, when it's not so high stakes, it can be difficult to find other people who have the same level of appreciation for the process and discipline and leadership that you have because you've come from life or death situations, and now you're starting to deal with people who go, it's just a TPS report. I mean, what's
Mhm.
the big deal here? So, how have you navigated that transition out into normie life where not everybody has the same level of dedication as you come from?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question and a great point. It is it can be a hard transition for military people to come out of the military and transition into the civilian world. Now people will say, well, geez, chief, you came out of the Navy, you work for the Navy still. You work with foreign military, you work with US military. And that's true, but out of the 13 people on my team, probably two or three at the most at any time have prior military experience. Um, I have a range of guys that are retired gunny sergeants from the Marines, retired chiefs like me. I have a 23-year-old program analyst that I hired her a year ago on my team. And the only experience she had prior to that was she had gone to 2 years of nursing school and she was a waitress at Buffalo Wild Wings. I brought her in a year later. She is one of my key players on my team, and I go to her every day. And her the way she has picked things up has been phenomenal. But the same thing, I've taken that same thing that I did in the military, is I tell them all the time, trust my process, trust me. I have this is how we do it. This is the process. The only thing that changes from military to civilian, in military, you don't have the luxury nor the time to question the process. People give you orders, you do the orders. We don't have time to have a debate. We don't have time for a focus group. We can't do a Kanban chart. We can't do a round table. We can't do apply Six Sigma. We have to go shoot the bad guy, kill him, let God sort him out later. That's war. In the civilian time, I've turned around and I've learned through education and through experience, trust the process, but the process can always be improved. And I tell my team all that all the time. And that's a large part of leadership in a business, in a civilian environment, that doesn't really change that much from military leadership. I teach my people, we have a process and I've developed a process, but kind of along the same lines is while we're doing business on a day-to-day basis, use my process, trust our process. But at the end of the day, if you have a better idea or if you have a thought about improving that process, then it's incumbent on you as a stakeholder in our team to bring that to me, the leader, and go, hey, Chuck, I was thinking, we do this in the process, but I was thinking, what if we did this? And I'm here to tell you, I've been doing this for a long, long time. 26 plus years in the military. I've been retired since 2007. So all that time in the civilian, that 23-year-old program analyst, I have another civilian, my deputy case manager. She is phenomenal. All the time, they come up with these things, and they go, why don't we do this way? And I go, well, I don't know. And I hate to use the phrase that I hate to use because the six words I hate the most, 7 words, we've always done it this way. I hate that because that's an excuse. That's an excuse not to change. So process is still inherently, you know, to me, I learned Lamarcus Lamont. If you ever watched The Prophet on CNBC, Marcus Lamont, tremendous businessman. Um, you know, people, process, product. In that order. Good people, good process, you'll have a good product. And so that's kind of where I sit, with that. We still have our processes, but we're a team and we can improve on it. And I don't think a lot of people, and we'll segue when you're ready, but we'll segue into the difference between management and leadership. And that's where I think in the civilian world, a lot of people don't understand that difference, that we've all had that boss role. And you go, well, geez, Bob, why are we doing this? Because that's what the rule book says. The corporate handbook says we do it like this. Yeah, but shut up, citizen. Shut up, employee. Do your job. If you don't like it, go work somewhere else. And people just trudge along every day and go, well, and that person might have had the $1 million idea. So you go from being a Fortune 500 company to being a Fortune 5 company at the top, but you don't know because you didn't shut your hole and listen to them.
Yeah. Before we dive into the management dichotomy, I wanted to kind of explore the space of the challenges that I think would be most common, and correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I get smarter. Is the team of leaders who they all want to lead and go in different directions,
Mm-hmm.
versus the people who say I don't need leadership and trying to lead a team that doesn't want a leader, because it's like working minimum wage job of McDonald's, right? Like my mom, she was working making salads when I was a kid, right?
Mhm.
So that's part of my background. And there's some teenage kid punk who's not deeply invested in the job, right? So how in the world does leadership apply in that situation versus a lot of people trying to all be leaders, and how does that sort out? So what are some of those challenges of leadership?
Yeah, I think, I've always said as a leader and a manager, because they're separate things. And that's a point to remember, that they're two different animals. But have being responsible for a team and executing something, I've always said I would rather have people that I have to rein them in and pull them back, instead of having to hit them with a cattle prod in the ass to make them move. I can always reel enthusiasm back. I can I can work with that. Same theory is, I don't want I don't need highly educated, highly experienced people. I would rather have 10, 25-year-olds that didn't know anything about what we're doing. I can teach you. That's not a problem. But I need your enthusiasm. So a large part of being a leader is, not any different than what you do in your show. You got to read your audience. Every audience is different. Every situation you come to as a leader is different. And you have to read those people. And what kills me about Twitter is you have these 23-year-old Twitter gurus that are writing ebooks on Gumroad about the 15 important lessons about how to be a leader in business. Dude, I've got underwear that's older than you. So, no, you can't sit there and go, I'm an INJT or whatever those Myers Briggs things are. And this is my style of leadership. That's bullshit. When people ask me, hey, Chief, what kind of leader are you? I'm like, it depends. I don't know. Who am I leading? I got to talk to you. I might have to be a coach. I might have to be the authoritarian. I may have to be the disciplinarian. I might have to be constantly, I've got to stroke you on the head and go, man, you're so awesome. Please stop crying. I would appreciate it. Sometimes you have to do that to get it done. So it's a suit, man. You got to have all these roles, and you got to know who you're leading, and you do that through the process, the storming, norming, forming, performing, all that stuff you learn in business school, which has merit. But you learn all that by going, you know if I put you next to Billy Red Horse, for example, I can lead both of you, but I've got to lead you different than I lead Billy. Just like you would be in the same position if you were in my spot. You find that sweet spot of people. Now, having a whole team, if you had a whole team of people that didn't want to be led, I don't think that's statistically possible, because I believe in my heart that somebody somewhere has that little spark. And 9 times out of 10, they won't step up because they don't want to come out of the norm. If everybody else in McDonald's is being just a slacker, well, they don't want to be different. But I can look at people and I can tell they're somebody will always do it when they don't think they're being watched. And you pick that person and you start grooming them. And then sometimes you just have to come right down to it. And I tell my team this to the day, and I have a team full of tremendous high performers. I still tell them that this is still a benevolent dictatorship. I will listen to everything you guys have to say, but at the end of the day, my team is full of leaders, but there's only one boss, and that's me. It stops with me. I'm responsible for everything that goes on. So I make the final decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, and we'll live and die on that. But the key to being able to be that arrogant about it is having a team that is bought in, and they've bought into you, and they've bought into what you're doing in your mission. How would I do that thing with the McDonald's where I've got 15 teenage kids that are just there to get minimum wage? They're there to get their weed money and a little bit of gas money. Dude, that's cool. That's your vibe, man. You're slinging quarter pounders to get weed money. Well, dude, how would you like to make some more weed money? If you're going to be here for 8 hours, because you need that money, if you got to be here for 8 hours, why not be the best quarter pounder slinger in the world? Why don't you walk the streets at night when you go to buy that dime bag from Daryl and go, Daryl, I am the world's most shit hot quarter pounder maker. Nobody can touch me in any McDonald's around the world. That 33 trillion sold, that's on me, baby. Have that attitude. Have that winning attitude, man. Okay, so you're slinging burgers. So be the best one there is. So you have to find that as a leader. You have to find the strings that motivate people. So that's a large part and parcel of, the famous Shakespeare saying, all the world's a stage and we're merely players. We are. We're all players. My job is the director. I have to find out what moves you and make you do what I need you to do.
I like that, especially the benevolent dictator thing. I love that a lot. It's like the diversity in advice and thought, unity in action seems to get great results.
Hmm.
And when you're the lightning rod for anything good and bad, then having final say on all of that sounds like a pretty good way of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I tell my team when anything good happens to my team, any accolade we get, I had absolutely nothing to do with that. Every criticism we get is on me. That was my fault. I am responsible for that. And I will go to bat for them and tell people. I have gone to foreign generals, admirals, Department of State, congressional aides, and said before, hey, look, my bad. This is on me. I screwed it up. But you know what? We'll fix it. It'll be okay. I absolutely had no idea what we were talking about because somebody on my team had done something. But that's okay. We didn't kill anybody. We didn't bankrupt the country. We didn't start a war. We can fix it. I'll take the hit for it. That's my job. They pay me a lot to do that. But my job is also to be a filter for the rest of the team so that they can go off and do what they do. But when something good happens, hey man, that was all them. That's those guys. I didn't do anything.
I like that. What is the difference? Because the manager and leader often get used interchangeably and with the same meaning, but they are different creatures. So
Mhm.
what are the differences?
I think one of the biggest tragedies, and John Rennie, if you've read John Rennie's book, he's a submarine commander. He and I had a discussion, and I was on his show, and we were talking. I think one of the biggest tragedies in business school, in colleges, is business schools do not teach leadership. There is no class for leadership. In fact, you can get a degree in business management, which is a typical one. In fact, you get a MBA, it's a master's in business, administration and business, but it's about business management. The difference, honestly, and it's in the textbooks, but the thing that you find out that's true, the difference between leadership and management. And I'm not saying one, they're not good and evil. They're not diametrically opposed forces. You have to be both, but you have to know when to be both. And it's real simple. Management is transactional. Leadership is transformational. By that, I mean management is transactional. Somebody has to know the routine. Somebody has to turn on the lights. Somebody has to make sure that the widget making machine is set to 1.21 gigahertz every day to make the maximum number of widgets to fall within that Six Sigma spectrum of allowed defects to meet the quality control numbers that this clipboard hangs here, this safety sheet hangs here. There's tape on the floor. We get this box in. This is how we do what we do. This is how we pay the bills. This is how payroll is done. Somebody has to oversee all of that. That's a manager. That's just transactional. Just like in your house, you pay bills every month. You're the business manager. You write the check. You don't think about paying the bill. You pay the bill. You pay the electric bill. You don't think about, well, gosh, how can I? Well, you probably would, but most people don't think, how can I get better electricity here? How can I improve? Leadership is when you have a group of people, you're given a mission to do. Your mission is to, hey, we're going to increase sales by 100,000 widgets in the next 4 quarters. And profits are going to be X number year over to date rolling. That's where leadership comes in. Now you have to take a group of people and you have to get them to buy into the vision. Leadership is a vision. You have a vision. What is it we want to do? We want to make our company the best widget maker. We want to be number one in sales quarter over quarter for 3 years, blah, blah, blah. You got to rally everybody around that. And you have to be the one to get them to say, you know what, man, Chuck wants 100,000 widgets. I'd go through the gates of hell for him, man. We're going to get 100,000 widgets. Let's go, people. Everybody buys into it. A leader has to make people feel like they're a stakeholder. They're a valued stakeholder. Richard Branson from Virgin he's phenomenal because I love his attitude. He goes, the customer is not always right. Sometimes the employees come, but you have to convince they are a valued stakeholder. You'll hear a lot of managers talk about people as resources. People are not
It's all good.
resources. People are not resources. People are human beings with a heart and a soul. They laugh, they cry, they got kittens, cats, dogs, kids. They go to church, they don't go to church, whatever. They are people. If you treat them like they are valued to the stakeholder, that they have skin in the game, and you explain this to them and you get them to buy into your vision, leadership is the easiest thing in the world. It takes it takes a little bit of personality, it takes some charisma, it takes some belief in it yourself, and you have to do the want. But the hard work of leadership and the sweat comes into where you can't sit back and go, now go, my minions, get us 100,000 widgets. You had better be in front going, let's go. You know, I made it a point, and I've made it a point. I'm the first one in, last one to leave. Not all the time, but I should be. But, you know, my team needs to see me working as hard as they do, if not harder, to get what we want to get done. That's leadership. Management being transactional, that's fine. We have to do that. We have to have somebody, you know, like I said, somebody's got to put the fries in the basket. Not everybody can wear the headset at the drive-through. You know, so somebody has to do that transactional stuff, and sometimes you may be both, and that's okay. It's not hard work never killed anybody, but you may have to do that part. So that's the difference between the two. But they don't teach that in schools, and it's people say, well, you can't learn leadership. You're either born with it or no, you're not. No, you're born with the ability to sing, dance, write poetry, do magic tricks. That's a talent. Leadership is an art. I can learn how to do this. You have to have certain ingrained things. Certain people are born to be that kind of personality to be a leader. I've seen people that have personalities like mine. They're great. They're outgoing. They're gregarious. They're the crappiest leaders you've ever seen, largely because they don't have a belief in themselves and their people. They're in it for the wrong reasons. You know, leadership isn't about chasing a paycheck, man. Leadership is, you know, you get that. I get my high from succeeding. I make a lot of money. I don't. People can look it up online. I mean, I'm a government worker. You can find out what I make online. It's not hard, but I don't care about that. I get my high off, you know, when we deliver a product, when I get a report that, however tragic, there's been an aircraft mishap, but the pilot and the co-pilot successfully ejected, and they got home to see their kid that night. That's a win right there, man. That's a high for me. That's what we do. So, you know, a manager can come in and go, just like at McDonald's. Yep, I fill out the timesheets, I fill out the work schedule, whatever. Somebody's got to do that, but somebody's also got to be who's the visionary. Ray Kroc was a visionary of McDonald's. You know, all of these people you see in your history of time, they were visionaries. When you think, you know, I'll ask you, and I do this when a lot of times I'll turn the tables and ask you the question: Who who do you consider a great leader?
Ooh, I think Napoleon would be the highest amplitude leader I can think of. His greatness was great. His foilables were phenomenally awful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like to try to go into Russia in the winter.
Yeah.
That's happened a lot. It's surprising how often that happens.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the just everything but that was phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say Napoleon.
And so that's a key point. Napoleon, for people that are a little less studied, that you know they have well, I'm a little dude sitting here with my hand in my coat, and they know Waterloo. that he suffered a massive defeat at Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he had a defeat, but Babe Ruth struck out 99 times for every home run he hit. People don't talk about that. History loves the winners. History will bury the losers. But as I tell people, and it's not very popular to say today, but it's just the truth. You can pick up leadership lessons from Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. Good or bad. The Japanese emperor was a tremendous leader, but one piece of bad advice, one bad assumption can derail anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean you weren't a great leader. So when I ask people that, a lot of times you'll be like, well, Abraham Lincoln. Okay, yeah, he was a great leader. What made him great? What are some of the things that made him great? And like you said, I mean, to look at what Napoleon did, I put him up there on the long lines of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great didn't get the name Alexander the Great by being, I'm just Alexander the okay. I mean,
I'm Alexander there hasn't been anybody else kind of good, so you don't know how bad I am the Great. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not like not like anybody was going, Egypt this time. Nah, I don't need Egypt. I don't need the trade routes. What do I need all that for? Genghis Khan. People laugh when I tell them one of the greatest leaders in my mind was Genghis Khan. It wasn't because he had a Mongolian empire. How he did it is ruthless. It's barbaric. It's insane. People will tell you Genghis Khan was insane with syphilis and gonorrhea. That's not the point. People miss the point. The leadership in that is hey, Genghis Khan didn't single-handedly run all over Asia and half of Europe. Genghis Khan convinced a whole shit ton of people to go do what Genghis Khan wanted him to do. That's transformational. The guy that was ordering spears and making poles and getting the horses fed, that's transactional. He might have been the best cavalry manager that's ever been on the face of the earth. And he probably was for the hordes that they had to move. But you don't know his name, do you? You don't. You know by God who Genghis Khan is. And that's my point that I tell everybody when I teach leadership. That's the difference.
Yeah, and his strategy of rewarding ability and to recognize this person is phenomenally skillful at this thing. And if you want to keep being phenomenally skillful at this thing and pursuing your life's passion, you can do that with me. And that'll be great. Cool. You're on board. If you don't, okay, yeah, we got to kill you.
Yeah.
So the ability for him to recognize talent and be able to integrate completely disseparate peoples into a unified mission is just impressive on a scale that is almost impossible to appreciate because we haven't really seen anything like that in generations.
No, you haven't. And I mean, and the military leaders, and unfortunate for military to go into leadership school in the military and a lot of senior enlisted stuff and a lot of advanced training, you get that. And they're the ones that plant these seeds in your head and they go, hey man, name off some of the great military leaders. I mean, we know Grant, we know, Schwarzkopf, we can go backwards and forwards in time. Was Sun Tzu the greatest military mind ever? No. Sun Tzu absolutely sucked as a military strategist. Sun Tzu was a master at the psychology of war, the art of war, thus the book. He wasn't a great military strategist. He didn't know how to move chess pieces on the board. He didn't know how to get this many spears lined up. Sun Tzu's whole theory was, hey man, make them think you're coming, but don't really come. Get them to give up just by pure, you make them think things, convince them that you're coming, but we're not really coming. So, I mean, as a pure military strategy, it sucks. But a psychological strategy, it worked, and it still works. But the point is, you take and you mix and match, and you look at this throughout history, and you look at some of the military minds, you look at some of the business leaders. I love reading about Lee Iacocca, how he went from Ford and he went to Chrysler. Some of these most ruthless. Steve Jobs was probably the biggest son of a bitch there ever was, but you know his name, don't you? I'm got his phone sitting here. I'm on his laptop, So Gates, all of these people, when you think about it, you have to go and look. They're not this history will probably paint them in a very angelic and saintly pastel color, but most of the time the path behind them is just blood,
Hmm.
but that's okay. How do you take that? It's not whether it's right or wrong, is how do you take that and learn from it? And how do you take that and apply it to it? You got to take a mix of all of these and you find what works best for you. So,
I have a question about
mhm.
why is it that there've been so many military advisors to kings and rulers, but usually are awful at governing themselves? Not governing themselves, but
Yeah.
their genius is in advising the ruler, but then going, well, no, that's I don't want that seat, but I will happily
Yeah.
sit next to you and tell you what to do. So what is it about that kind of military strategy leadership advisory role that is different from the governing? Is it the management leadership dynamic, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can just look in recent U.S. history, and by recent, I mean since the 50s. Um, Eisenhower probably wasn't a really great general. Obviously, he engineered D-Day, um, helped get us to the victories we needed, but he probably sucked as a president. Um, Grant was the famous story is Ulysses S. Grant was a horrible president, and he hated it. He hated it. He ran because people talked him into it. He was a great military mind, uh, great advisor to President Lincoln. He's whispering in Lincoln's ear. Colin Powell. There's good reason Colin Powell hasn't run for president. He understood that. He learned those lessons. I think what it is I think because military generals and all of this, it is a very cut and dried scenario that you get put into, that you're given a mission, you're given a lot of leeway, you're given a mission, you're told to execute the mission, sometimes by any means necessary, but then it's given to you and you're on your own and you go and you do it. And then, most presidents, most kings, that if they didn't come from a military background, they don't have that mindset or that strategy. So they have to have someone to whisper in their ears to make things happen. And I think that where you take those roles and when you put the guy that was the Sigma to the Alpha, the shaman to the king, when you take that person who really is really good at being behind the curtain and making everything move, when you take them out from behind the curtain, it destroys them. It's a crappy analogy, but it works. The Wizard of Oz. He's great behind the curtain. You thought the all powerful Oz was the king sitting up there on the Emerald Throne. Really, it's this little dude behind the curtain making everything move. And when you bring him out to the light of day, hey, you're not impressed, and he's not very good at it. He has to give up, and now Oz is destroyed. So I think because you're in that role of very comfortable of, hey man, tell me what to do, leave me alone, and I'll go do it. Let me plan it out, let me make it happen. I'll give you top cover. I'll advise you the best I can of what we should do. But when they get into that role, and then honestly, when on a in a monarchy, it's one thing. It's easy. You make the rules. When you're in a democracy or a republic like we are, and you have to be the president, which is really just a chief executive. I think a lot of the military guys just get so fed up. To be quite honest, they get fed up with the bullshit of day to day of all of the pandering and the ass kissing, and you got to make this person. You can't make everybody happy. They go from that mindset of when you're a very senior leader in the military, it's you have that authority. Go do what I say, and not a lot of people are going to question you. You get in the other role where you go do this, and everybody in the world is going to question you, from Fox News to the congressman, to the New York Post, whatever, to Jack Dorsey on Twitter. Somebody's going to question you, and they honestly they can't. They're not brought up to. to perform in that bubble. I think is the biggest reason.
Thank you. That has been a question that has just stuck in the back of my head
Yeah,
for years and just never thought to ask. So thank you
yeah.
for
You're
scratching that
welcome.
itch.
Sure.
So to that angle of the advisory role, one of the ways that you hit my radar is being on Twitter and being a part of kind of a self-described advisory, older elder council group of
Hmm.
folks who are providing guidance and insight about life, business, happiness, all that kind of thing. So is this just a different dimension of the work you've always done, or what's your calling to be so out front and public about your drive to help people?
Yeah, I think um, the gray wave is, as we call it, Billy Red Horse, Dennis Himes, PD Magnan, a few of us, the older guys. Generally, anybody over 50, 52, 55, stuff like that. I think we all got together one night and we were just kind of talking. And this has always been just a natural extension of what I do. Um, my dad taught me how to be a leader at a very young age. I tell this story all the time and I've written about it too, that, my dad, when I was 10, 12 years old, my dad ran for city council in our little town and he got elected. He's a very popular guy. He got elected and, one Saturday he got up early and he went and rode the trash truck on the trash truck route. Well, for a 12-year-old and, a middle class family in our town, to me that was just flabbergasting. I was so embarrassed. My dad's riding the back of a trash truck picking up trash. And, he let me stew and he let me rant about it for a little bit. And then he jerked a knot in my ass real quick and said, "Look, son, first of all, I'm going to give you two things." He goes, "Who's the richest guy in town?" I'm like, "Well, it's Andy Hill, the lawyer. He's the richest guy in town, got a nice big house out on the lake, got a boat and all this." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "You know Will, Mr. Will, black gentleman, the trash truck supervisor?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know Mr. Will. Everybody knows Mr. Will." He goes, "I'll tell you what, if Andy Hill, the rich lawyer, didn't show up for work for 4 weeks, and Mr. Will, the trash man, didn't show up for work for 4 weeks, who do you think would get noticed was missing first? When everybody's trash is piling up on the street, Mr. Will would be noticed." He goes, "So no job is better than another one. No man is better than another man. We all have our roles to play." He goes, "Second of all," he goes, "when I got elected council, I was put on the committee that oversees the city sanitation." He goes, "How can I help these people fix what's wrong? And how can I understand what they're doing if I don't get out there and do it with them?" He goes, "I'm a leader. I'm no better than they are. No job is beneath me. If I'm going to lead these people, I'm going to do what they do and I'm going to find out what it's all about." Because I'm not going to do it all the time. I don't need to do it all the time. That's not my job now. But my job was to understand. Seek first and then understand. So he taught me that at a very early age and it stuck with me.
Hmm.
And then as I moved up in the military, I kind of gravitated towards junior people of as they came into the military, kind of just being that older brother, take you under my wing. Hey, shipmate, come alongside. I'm gonna do you right. And I've been successful in that. When my son was born, we got him involved in Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. So I was a scout leader, um, and it really spoke to me a lot. And it's I wrote about this. I wrote about a lot of things, but it kind of crushed my soul with the things that the Boy Scouts went under lately, with what happened to them, and they're just a dead organization. But in the heyday, and you can't think like this, but going on a camp out with 3 or 4 men and 10, 15, you know, 13 to 17-year-old boys, and you sit in the woods for a weekend, and you sit around the campfire, you can have discussions about things that young men need to talk about that the women don't need to be around. And I don't mean that to be misogynist, sexist, nothing against single mothers. You know, that's not it. It's just there are certain conversations that young men need to have with men. And that's where you get a chance to mold them about this is how you act on a first date. This is how you act on a second date. This is when you're married. This is how you speak to people. This is how you do things. So that kind of really, bringing up those, I don't want to say that they're Southern morals and Southern, but they are, you know, teaching kids, yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Manners are the best thing I can teach you, you know, after my son learned how to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes no thank you, after he learned his manners and how to wipe his own butt, there really wasn't a whole lot I had left for him at that point. I could have thrown him out of the house and made him get a job. But we decided to do this as the gray wave. Is some of these guys, it wasn't. We started noticing, like we brought up that trend in Twitter of the 23, 24-year-old gurus that can tell you how to pick up girls, how to have game, how to do this. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. I don't care. I'm not trying to kill their side hustle. I don't care. But what I want to do is make sure that young men and women coming up, who my job is to train my replacement, always and forever. I'm not going to be here forever, obviously. The next generation of leaders, I have a moral obligation to them and myself to raise that next generation of leaders. I can sit and bitch about the younger generation, the millennials, the Zoomers, and all that. I can bitch about them, or I can do something about it and do the same thing and go, "Hey, come here, come here. Let's have a conversation. I'm not judging you. I don't judge any of them. But have you thought about this? We throw life ropes. When you're down, we'll help you, and we'll even help you. I'm taking guys on Twitter that I've watched them, and I've gone into their DMs and gone, "Hey, dude, don't do that. That's not cool. You do it if you want to, but I'll unfollow you and I'm done with you." And a lot of times that's a great leadership trait is you make people. I don't lead by fear and I don't mentor by fear. What I want to do is I want to instill the fear of disappointment in people. I want people that are under my tutelage. I want them to be so afraid of disappointing me that I'm always that little voice in their ear going, "Man, what's Chief going to say?" Because that's how I grew up with my dad. Because I still to this day, my dad's passed away several years ago. But to this day, is I'm a 57-year-old man, and I'll go to say something smart ass online on Twitter, and before I hit the enter key, I'll go, "Man, if my dad read this, what would my dad say to me?" He'd be like, "You fool." And so I'm not, it doesn't work 100% of the time, obviously, because if you go through my tweets, yeah, okay. But I try. And so the gray way, we wanted to take that and we don't do it to sell books. We don't do it to get paid. We don't have a paid club that you sign on to have Zoom calls with it. And there's nothing wrong with those things. They're great. What we do is we just pick people out here and there that come to us first of all, or we'll come to you. And it's really just an obligation to raise the next generation of leaders because it's like I tell the young group that I deal with is what you guys complain about the boomers. You know what? Here in 20 years, you're going to be the boomer generation. You're going to be 50 something years old and you're going to be sitting around bitching about the 20-year-olds. And if you don't think that this has happened ever since the first person, as soon as Adam was 50 something years old, he's looking at Cain and those idiots. And it just started from there and we've never stopped. So it's a cycle and it's the cycle of life. But when you get to that point, you have a choice. You can bitch about the younger generation or you can step in where you can. I'm not going to stop the rioting in Philadelphia. I'm not that good. But what I can do, if I get one young man or one young woman who either works for me or talks to me on Twitter, talks to me on a Zoom call, even if it's 10 years down the road, that light bulb clicks and they go, "Oh, okay. Now I know what Chief was talking about." Dude, I'm a success, man. My life is fulfilled. And I can't think of any higher honor or glory. And I talk a lot about honor too, but I can't think of any higher honor or glory for me to have one saved soul that comes up to be that next generation of leader that 20 years from now he's sitting here in a chair like me and he's having the same conversation with a younger you who's come up and done the right things and we're trying to help people. We're trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah, there's a lot that resonates with me there. I mean, my dad raised me the same way. Disappointing him was the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Ooh,
Oh,
oh,
oh.
brutal.
I'd
It,
rather have the go pick me out a switch,
yep.
bring it back. I'm gonna tan your house. I'd rather get a spanking and get my ass whipped any day than for my dad just to sit there and not say anything. And go, you know, son, I'm awfully disappointed in you. Oh my God. It's like, even to this day, oh my God, Jonathan, sitting here right now, it's like a knife in my heart, man. You
Yeah.
know, I can still feel it. It's terrible.
Yeah, there's a book series called the Gunslinger series from Stephen King. And in there, one of the curses is you've forgotten the face of your father.
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
ooh, ooh,
Yeah.
that's rough. Man,
Yeah.
that's
That's,
rough.
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and the second thing was that I've gotten emails like that where, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but 4 years ago you talked to me after a show, and here's how I reworked my life, and I just wanted to thank you. Like there's nothing that I've ever bought that has ever come close to feeling that way. Like no way you could buy that feeling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you can't measure the value of taking 3 minutes to be kind to someone, of how that, and you're right. We've all seen those stories, whether it be a celebrity or performer, somebody that takes that, yeah, you're tired after a show, you want to get back to the hotel room, you want to have a drink, you want to, that 30 seconds that you talk to some kid, and you're right. You don't know whose life you're changing on a daily basis. That's not to quote unquote use your shtick, but that's the magic of life. You don't know what strings you're pulling in fate, in the universe, every day, and how, the I don't know how much I believe of, the butterfly effect, but there is a chaos theory to me in my mind that it's a chain. What I do today is going to have a ripple effect years down. I won't be here to see it, but how is that ripple? Is it going to be a negative or a positive? And I try every little stone I throw in the universal pond, I try to make sure that my ripples are going the right way and they're positive ripples, that they're not going to cause a tidal wave somewhere. So I mean, yeah. I
Yeah.
need to write that. I need to write that down. I need to tweet that out. That was pretty good.
Fortunately, it's on record.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. So let's kind of wrap things up on the
Sure.
topic of honor,
Hmm.
because that's a word you don't hear much anymore. And I'm a Southerner at heart too. I grew up in the mountains of North
Hmm.
Carolina, and Southerners are an honor culture people.
Yes.
And preserving your honor at all costs is one of the top priorities. But
Yeah.
that's not something that's shared universally. So what's honor to you?
That's a great question, and I get asked it a lot because I talk about it, and I'm glad I get asked about it. I'll tell everybody, for if you don't understand what Jonathan just said, please go research um, honor culture in the South. It all comes back from the Scottish people that were sent over here, and Scottish people love to drink whiskey and fight, and that's how most of Appalachia became to be. Is we're all mostly part Scottish and Viking at some point
They
if we
wanted to
grew
move
up in that area.
somewhere that looked like home. And
Yeah,
if you look at Scotland, you look at the mountains here, you're just like, all right, yeah, I can see why they moved
yeah,
here and not into Arizona.
yeah. They had a choice. They could bow to the king or leave, and they either went to New Zealand or they came to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. So I mean, it is an honor culture, but so research that if you want to read Sanction. Roman McClay talks about that a lot in Sanction, and it's a basis for the book. I mean, it's a great insight into a lot of things. But honor, we learn it in the military. You have the honor duty country. You know, Boy Scouts, you have on my honor. You know, and I tell everybody to get a basis of, to me, honor. It's a verb. It's a noun. Both. Honor is a thing you do. Honor is a thing that is. Honor, the thing you do, is simply living with integrity. And integrity is character. And character is the old thing that you see online. Character is what you do and how you act when you don't think anyone is watching you. That's your honor, how you live your life, your morals. And I will say on this that honor, you got to be careful, because I ask this question all the time when I've given talks on honor. Is I use the example, a man that there's a flood, there's a natural disaster. A man goes by a store, he kicks in the door, he steals a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk to feed his kid and his wife. By the law and by all technical social mores, he's a thief. But did that man display honor? He absolutely is an honorable man. If no other reason, he had to fight an internal battle with his conscience of what he's been ingrained with, what's right and what's wrong. He had to fight that battle and overcome it to support his family, which providing for your family is the highest honor there is. Sustaining another life is the highest honor there is. So people can't, well, but he's okay. We'll go back to psychology class where you go, the train's coming and you can save 9 people, or you can say, what are you going to, somebody's going to die. What are you going to do? Okay. Well, it's, you can't answer that. So there's not a correct answer, but that's just my perspective. Honor the thing is, I tell people to think about this is like this. Honor is a currency, pure and simple. You get so much. You can either be born with it, you can go out and earn it, you can go get it yourself, you can be have the worst start of life that you want, and you can be an honorable person. Honor is a currency. And how you spend that currency on a day-to-day basis, just like regular currency. If I've got a lot of money in the bank, I have a lot of credit. I have credibility. If you got a lot of honor behind you through your past actions, the way you perform today, the way people see you do, you're building up that currency. You got a lot backing you up. You're a rich person. You're full of honor. Every time you do something that's dishonorable, you lie, you cheat, you steal, you do something that that's not morally right by your morals, you spend a little bit of your currency. You can go bankrupt and be totally unhonorable. You can be totally bankrupt. Can you get it back? Sure you can. Is it hard? Sure it is. And the reason, and so I take that and I go, the way that you think about it like this, part of the last line of the Eagle Scout oath takes the words from the end of the Declaration of Independence, which most people never read either the entire Declaration of Independence, the entire Constitution, or the entire Bill of Rights. Very fewer people have even read the Magna Carta, which was the basis for what we established, nor have anyone gone back and read about the six peaceful nations of the Indians in the Northeast that really Jefferson took theirs and mixed with the Magna Carta, and we created our U.S. government, which is a republic, not a democracy, but that's another conversation for another time. So I tell people, I'm like, think about this. The 30-something men that signed the Declaration of Independence that said, you know what, we've had it. We're done with this jackass king. We're done with the stamp tax and his tea tax and everything else. We're going to make our own country. We're going to do or die. We're going to stand on this mountain, and this is the mountain we're going to die on, is we're going to be a free nation. So those 30-something guys in there, farmers, wealthy guys, plantation owners, statesmen, lawyers, bankers. Average age was about 30-ish, 31, I believe, 32 if I read it right. So pretty young bunch of dudes that were sitting there. Ben Franklin was the oldest, the youngest guy was from down in Tennessee, I believe. Anyway, so these guys, they go in and they say, look, man, we're going to do this. We're going to write this list of stuff that we're pissed off at the king. We're going to send off this letter and we're going to sign it. And the way they chose to end it was the end of the Declaration of Independence, to where they said, into this endeavor, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So I tell people, I'm like, think about this. These guys knew that if they got caught, and a lot of them got hung, a lot of them got executed, a lot of them went into ruin. So they pledged their lives, first of all. They got hung for this. Their fortunes, guys went bankrupt. They lost their farms. They lost their family fortunes. They died destitute, just basically modern day bums. But more importantly, into all of that, they were pledging their sacred honor. And that was their commitment to each other. That, look, man, we're in this. We're going to do the right thing by each other. We're in this, do or die. We said it. We're going to do it. We're not going to back down. We're not going to put a retraction. We're not going to say that it was a Russian collusion. We're not going to say that it was a media fake news. We're going to stand on this, right, wrong, or indifferent. We may be, they're like, we could be making the worst mistake ever in the history of mistakes, but they didn't. It turned out okay. But the thing I tell people is they pledge their sacred honor, and they didn't pledge their sacred lives. They didn't pledge their sacred fortunes, but their honor above all of that other stuff was the one thing that sealed the deal. That people were like, well, Bob's pretty serious about this, man. He pledged his honor. So I tell people, think of honor as a currency. It is what holds you up, is what's behind you, is what makes you believable. People will trust you, people will come to you, people will be more inclined to see you as a person of virtue and reliability and a solid person. So that's kind of the quick take on honor of how I talk about it. So yeah.
Let's make honor great again.
God, I wish, man. I wish. And you know, and for a lot of these guys that profess to be politicians, I wish some of them would actually they should make you learn the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence by heart before you take office, so that you know what you're talking about. You know, things like, hey, we should expand the Supreme Court. If there was only a way that we could expand the Supreme Court, well, there is, jerky. Read the Constitution. It tells you how to go about doing all this. Great, great, great owner's manual for this country. But
RTFM.
yeah, 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 exactly.
Exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we've packed about as much into this as one human being could digest in 5 sittings.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put a wrap on it. So
Cool.
I want to make sure that earlier you touched on it and you didn't take your shot then. So I want to make this ultra clear. This is the time to shamelessly self-promote. There's no shame
Yeah,
here. I am
yeah.
encouraging you to promote yourself. So let people know where, if they resonate with you, where they can
Hmm.
find you, where they should find you, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the fastest way is Twitter at Chief Chuck 2K. Is my Twitter handle. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Follow me, DM me. I'll talk to people. My email is chiefchuck2k@gmail.com. I have a Substack that I have a subscription that I send out emails Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes on Friday it's really a goofy, music selection, dad joke of the week, something like that. But a few emails and they're quick to read. I don't write long form. I write about emails that take about 3 minutes to read because that's about the length of my attention span. Um, and this really great guy helped develop my website for me. I mean, you might know his name. He's Jonathan Pritchard. He helped me get a website going, chiefchuck.com, that you can link to all of that. And you know what? I don't sell anything. I had a little book on Gumroad before, but I gave up on that. But if anybody wants it, I'll give you a copy. It's called Sailor Words. It's about nautical phrases and how we got some of our common phrases. I'll give it to you. Hell, I don't care. But instead of selling something to your audience, I'm going to sell the game of imagination. Go to gameofimagination.com. Watch Jonathan do a show. I've been a participant, and it's phenomenal, man. If you guys aren't Mind Reader University followers, great stuff. Obviously, this podcast and Jonathan's show was, dude. You're not just a magician. You're not Doug Henning or whoever that dude was that tried to make me think he made a bridge disappear that time. Yours actually really is thought provoking, and wow is what you come away doing, scratching your head, going, how the hell did he do that? So that's pretty good. So there, I pitched something.
Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome. We'll call that good. I'm
yeah.
gonna shut down the live stream, and there we go.